beautiful.
There's nothing like being introduced by a poet. Thank you for that. I love you, babe.
I love you too, and I'm really excited for us to talk with everybody. There is an overture, because the way that this conversation was shaped and put together that's really exciting is that so many of you were asked what you wanted to talk about with Michelle Obama. And so those questions, those hundreds and hundreds of very, very rich and wonderful questions were my basis for beginning to craft and shape some themes, some areas. So your voices are in all of the questions and areas that we will be going over today. And so I wanted to start off by saying that in the arts, we often say the specific is universal. And the kind of the topic I thought that we were really in the zone is the self in the world. So in the arts, we say the specific is universal, and from the village, we can know the world. And so today, in shaping this conversation around the self in the world and how all of us go about our individual lives from our communities out into larger worlds, I was thinking about place. You went from a girl of the south side of Chicago to the global stage, filling this room here as we have come together with people who want to understand what we're thinking about from here to there. How do our roots define us as we move outward from where we begin? And also, just to sort of mark the space of the conversation, over the course of our many years of friendship and your increasingly public life, oh so public, you've always been someone who is self-effacing about your own accomplishments, almost matter-of-fact about them, and very empowering about the collective, always turning that individual energy out to the collective. So we'll be thinking about how we take our power as well and move it out for other people. We're going to talk about how we can demonstrate and teach and encourage young people to keep on keeping on, and how taking care of ourselves is a very important part of that. And also talk about how art and culture have a very unique and particular role in making our civic space more livable, more beautiful, more true, more hopeful. So that's what we're going to talk about.
Sounds good. You guys like that?
All right. Okay, wonderful.
Snaps, that's what you all do, right? Yes.
I know, yeah, please. I love the snap thing, so let's make sure that we do that. Okay, so let's start off with the power of words and inspiration. Because we know that words not only matter, but also words are they carry meaning, and they carry who we are. Our words and our language are the main way that human beings give themselves to each other and say who it is that they are. And you have put some words out into the public that have been very, very useful to people. And I could list many, but of course, when they go low, we go high.
As much as we can.
As much as we can. That's right. Yes, we always can. We always have that high place.
Yes,
we carry that place.
Yes, we can.
So I wonder, because that's been such a useful thing to so many people, what are some words, songs, poems, prayers that have been and are meaningful guides for you?
I've been thinking about this, whether they're, words, music, all of that. There are many points of inspiration for me when you think about those. But when I think about the words that stay in my head, that guide me, what I wake up to every day, it's the voice of Marion and Fraser Robinson. Marion Robinson, who's sitting over there right now. Because it shows that, words don't have to be poetic. They don't have to be set to music. Most of the words that guide us are those words that we've heard growing up, those messages. And for me, I had some pretty powerful parents who were very understated and humble in their own rights. But I live each day trying to make them proud. And I think a lot of that, comes from my father. Many of you know my father's story, but my parents didn't go to college. They were not of wealth. They were not of means. My father had MS, and he was a an athlete until he was stricken with MS in the prime of his life. He used to box and swim. So you imagine someone with that much life, all of a sudden, for no apparent reason, not being able to walk without the assistance of cane. And that's how I always knew my father, as someone with a disability. But the other thing I knew about my father was that even in his disability, he commanded a level of respect. Mm-hmm. He was the center of not just our nuclear family, but our family. You know, my father used to sit in his chair, and people would come for advice. They would come for money. They would come for love, for affirmation. He would give that affirmation so willingly. But the thing that I remember about my father is that he never complained. He got up, he went to work, not a work that filled him with passion. That was something that my parents didn't even understand, working for passion. You work to make a living. He worked at the water filtration plant right here in Chicago his entire life. He got up, he put on that blue uniform, he got in his car, and whatever pain he must have been experiencing throughout his life, the fatigue that comes from MS, the inability to lift your own leg without help and assistance, he never complained. And I think for me and my brother to grow up watching somebody sacrifice that much, someone with that much power and influence and love, never complain once. You know, those are the things the stories, the messages, the images that roll around in my head that tell me I have no reason to complain, and that I am a blessed child. Maybe I didn't have much money, but I was blessed with the love of a father and a mother who gave me gifts that were priceless. And for that, I owe so much. So I think about that. I think about making them proud. I think about, with every word I utter, what does that mean for them? How do I speak to their legacy? So I don't know that it's a song. If I were to pick a song, it would be a Stevie Wonder song of any kind. If there were poetic words, they'd be the words of a Maya Angelou, powerful, true. But if they're everyday words, they're the words of Marion and Fraser Robinson, telling us to do what you say you're going to do, to be honest and true, to treat people with dignity and respect. And it wasn't just their words, it was their actions. It was be open-hearted, to be empathetic, and to make your life useful, and to define that usefulness as broadly as you can. Those words guide me. And they led me to Barack Obama, who reminded me very much of my own father in his decency and his honesty and his compassion. So that was my foundation.
You know what's so interesting is also about the words that weren't spoken, the words of complaint that weren't spoken, and how much silences also teach us. And I think also, one of the amazing things about you is that you have such a healthy skepticism. And I say that, I'm not, like, true skepticism, which is to say, I wonder if your parents ever said anything to you along the line of, and don't believe the hype.
Oh, gosh. Having Marion Robinson in the White House with you for 8 years is a grounding experience for all of us, for every Obama. Marion Robinson was just not pressed ever. She's like, I can go home anytime. Like, yes, we know you can, Mom. But, yes, it's that sort of matter of fact. It's, it's not where you live. It's not what you have. It's who you are. Yes. And that was sort of the ethos of my entire family. I mean, we were working class folks from my immediate family to my extended family. We were a family of carpenters and teachers and police officers and, seamstress. We weren't lawyers and doctors, and there was a skepticism of those folks who tried to be uppity. There was a skepticism of unabashed wealth, or privilege. There was a skepticism. My father was somebody who never believed in joining, that you were independent throughout your life. So those were kind of messages that we got, not just from my father, but from my grandparents, my grandfather. We were privileged to have been raised with all of my grandparents, maternal, paternal. So in Chicago, we talked about this at dinner, but in Chicago, you were very much a part of your neighborhood. And in our neighborhood was comprised mostly of my extended family. So we lived in a house above my maternal aunt. We lived around the corner from my grandmother and another aunt. My grandfather, my mother's father, they were separated, never divorced, but lived around the corner from each other. That's Black Chicago right there. They lived right around the other corner.
Functional.
It's functional dysfunction. And they didn't speak to each other either. It's like they lived around the corner, but you didn't talk to them. You didn't talk about the other one with the other one. And then my paternal grandparents lived in Parkway Gardens, which is really just a 5-minute drive from our house. So we grew up with a lot of these messages. And, my maternal grandfather, Southside, we called him. He loved jazz and filled the house with music. He put speakers in every room of the house, even when my mother was young. And because he didn't have a lot of money, all of his music collection they were sort of hodgepodge together. Turntables that didn't match, a reel-to-reel that he found in the alley, cabinets that he made, speakers that he borrowed. But the house was filled with Miles Davis and Coltrane. We blew out candles to Ella Fitzgerald at birthdays, and he fried chicken and made milkshakes at midnight, and they played bid whist until all hours of the night. And in that household, there was healthy skepticism and fear. There was fear of other people, fear of leaving that unit. There was fear of what could happen to you out there in the big bad world. So we came from a place of skepticism. But it was interesting that my parents, out of all of that, they always pushed us beyond that initial fear. I always talk about one of my favorite comedians, Chris Rock, tells this joke about what it's like living in a dangerous neighborhood, that your world just gets more narrow. At first they tell you, don't just stay on the block, don't leave, and then stay in the front yard, and then stay on the porch, and then stay in your room because it's dangerous, and before you know it, you're just hopping around on one foot in your living room. A lot of Black people live like that because fear is real. But I had parents who pushed us beyond that fear. They encouraged us to not be so skeptical that we couldn't explore and experience and take risks. And I don't know where they got that from, because that's not how they were raised. They were very much raised to be within the limits that were set by segregation and Jim Crow and lynchings and, inequality. But my parents pushed us beyond that. But skepticism still was the foundation that would protect you. So I think in many ways it's that skepticism that I carry with me, that, don't be too high, don't enjoy the highs too much, don't wallow in the lows too much. There's a balance that you have to have in life to succeed, and it takes a little skepticism to sort of hold on to that.
Yes.
I got some snaps.
Yeah. And I think also in that skepticism are real critical thinking tools in order to, I remember there was a magazine profile, a New Yorker early profile of you, where you talked about some of your uncles and said in another social order they would have been bank presidents.
Absolutely,
with the way that their quality of mind, what they were good at in particular, but you were in a particular social order. And I think that being able to really have a critical understanding of the lay of the land is also something that you've brought forward with you.
Absolutely. And that's, some of it is life context. Some of it is study. Some of it is statistics and understanding charts and graphs and how things work. That's also what makes, I think, Barack and I such a good team. He is a lot of the head, and I operate a lot from the gut. You know, it's the sort of stuff that you learn about how the world works, and that has informed me. And maybe it's growing up in the inner city, you know, just we're walking around the block to school, you could get your butt kicked if you talked like a white girl. You had to figure out how to exist in a world where you were intelligent but still had to survive.
Yes.
So there's a lot of that comes into play as I understand how the broad world works and how oppression and segregation and all of that, you know, gritty stuff works.
Yes. Yes, yes. And you also just, in that beautiful portrait of your growing up, we're talking about living with art. In the music that was playing with all of those rigged up record players. And what it is to have art at the ready all the time to help you feel and live life. Could you talk more about living life with art in all kinds of ways?
You know, I don't think I appreciated how much art was a part of our little modest working class life, and it was essential. My father was an artist, a beautiful artist. He was a painter and a sculptor. Again, had he been from a different family, of a different era of a different race, he might have known that art could have been a way of life. But that was, to go back to the skepticism, that was a luxury, you know. But to watch him paint and sculpt, you know, he loved to do nudes and take a plain mold of clay and turn it into, from the bottom up, something beautiful. And he worked with charcoals and oils and water paints. It was a gift of his. So there was that part of it. You know, I used to paint all of the backgrounds in our little operetta workshop foundation. We used to sing and dance. I had most of my family, they were musicians. My great aunt, she was a choir director at the church, and they taught us to sing and to be in plays, and performing was a big part of growing up, not to mention the music. You know,
I did not know that.
We did
Operetta?
The operetta. We didn't sing operatically, but you know, one year my brother was Hansel in the Hansel and Gretel production, and I was a fairy princess.
Mommy's laughing, remembering.
It was a good one. But every year there was some big performance at a church basement or in a school, you know, theater that was borrowed, and it was sort of a ragtag little theater group that my aunt used to teach. But I think that was my first. Those were the little things in my life that brought art into my world. But then as I went to school, I realized that there were kids who were only there because of art. You know, that's the power of art that we all know. I mean, it's art is the first language we speak. Truly, you know, every child, before they can talk, they're given a pencil, a paper, some crayons, and they're drawing. And it's life that yanks that instinct from them. We're now living in public school systems where art and music and PE, the things that bring life and joy, are the first things that are cut. But when I was growing up, those are the things that would hook some of those kids that weren't good at math or reading because their brains worked differently. They were motivated by something different. For them, you would see those kids light up when it was time to draw or to speak or to sing. That's the power of the arts, because as we know, it's often the hook that gets kids to then understand why math is important. It's the thing that gets them to school to do reading, which is why we made art and music and culture such a centerpiece of our White House, because we are trying to remind this country, this world, that arts are not a luxury. You know, it's not something to be given to those who can afford it. That we have so many talented young people who are shaping this world and can shape a vision. It's the thing that unites us. I mean, we see that with, you know, my favorite piece of art to date right now is Hamilton, right? I mean, we see the power of arts, music, dance, rap, poetry, spoken word, you name it, to teach history in a way that history teacher just can't reach people.
Yes.
So how we deny that is, you know, how we don't support that is amazing to me.
And makes no sense. And I think that also, you brought up all of the culture in your time in the White House. And I think that Earth, Wind, and Fire was the first concert that you had.
Yes.
And so what I thought was amazing
the governor's
about
ball.
that,
Imagine to see these governors jamming the
I know
Earth,
they
Wind,
did,
and
though,
Fire.
right? I mean, it called them into that space. But I think that what was so important about that was it was saying that just because you groove to it doesn't mean that it is not high art.
Absolutely.
What it would take for any musician to have the precision and bright light of Earth, Wind, and Fire's music, it is virtuosity.
It is an intellect. It is a skill. It is a talent. It's a gift.
Yes.
And we take it for granted because we enjoy it, which
Yes.
is a sad kind of thing.
Yes, yes. And I think also moving out, to me what I see in that is Earth, Wind, and Fire is of the basement. Earth, Wind, and Fire is of
the red light.
Of intimate spaces. But then it was on the world stage. I'm just carrying on as though you didn't just do that. And so I think that that what is so, I think about, the Bard of Chicago, Gwendolyn Brooks, whose name I always must call when we're in her space. She had a wonderful poem where she contrasted the Chicago Picasso, which is a wonderful thing that it's in downtown space, with the Wall of Respect, to talk about what it meant in community for people to experience art and beauty and greatness as a way of saying, this is who we are, and this has brought us together.
Well, and you think about how little art there is, public art there is in communities on the South Side, which is, one of the things we hope to do with the Obama Presidential Center, and there need to be places for public art outside, just like downtown, just like the Picasso, just like the Bean.
Yes.
There's nothing that those pieces in communities are few and far between.
That's right.
And they become the gathering places for community, not just a place to see beauty and possibility, but it's a place for people to come together. And we deserve those things in our communities just as much as the rest of the city.
That's right. I haven't even turned a card.
Oh, we got to turn a card.
Let's turn a card.
Turn card.
But we've covered all of it. So words and inspiration. So now this is an interesting zone, and there were some wonderful questions one from Sri Lanka and some others about using your voice. And about, so moving out of the zone of the voice in an artistic sense, how do you use your voice to express disagreement? How can you be productive in disagreement? What do you know about that? Where did you see that modeled? And how do you take that forward?
Well, in thinking about this question, I started a little bit, I pulled back a bit, because I think the question of how you use your voice comes after you find your voice.
Yes.
And I think that that's something that a lot of people take for granted, that having a voice just happens. So in order to know how to use it and how to use it carefully and how to debate, you have to find it. And I think in particular for women, as we're seeing now, finding that voice, it doesn't just happen overnight. And I think about me and sort of where did my voice come from? Again, we talked about this at our table, our dinner. But again, going back to Marion and Fraser, I realize now in hindsight that I had some special parents who, from a very, very young age, again, not people who read parenting books, they probably didn't think that their role models of parents were as perfect for them. My grandparents were better grandparents than they were parents. But for some reason, my parents understood that teaching children at a young age that their voice was valuable was important. So I didn't live in a household where kids were taught to be seen and not heard. I was allowed to speak my mind at 3 and 4. They asked my opinion. They wanted input from me and my brother about things that involved the family and life. We knew about money and paying bills, and we knew about issues in the family. You had to be respectful, but the notion that a 5-year-old wouldn't have feelings about how their life went was not something that my parents believed in. You know, my mother always said she was raising adults, she wasn't raising children. So she spoke to us as people, because that's what you needed to practice. And I think that all of that early stuff, for those of us who are parents out there who are thinking about how to empower our children, it starts very early. So you can't shush them because you don't agree with them. Because every time you shush them, you're telling them, or you're telling them to respect your elders even when they're wrong. There's a difference between just respecting something that you see as wrong and not feeling it and speaking out about it. You do it in a respectful way, but we were never taught that what we saw and what we felt wasn't real. You know, so if a teacher treated me unfairly in class, I couldn't just immediately go off on them. I could come home and go off about it in the kitchen, and then we talk about it. And then Marian would hustle on up to school and quietly go off on them. Unbeknownst to me, I've heard of many teachers that got shut down, you know, and it was like, well, you going back to school and you do what you're supposed to do. But I always knew I had a defender, I had an advocate, which made me ready to use my voice. You know, so when we think about women in particular, you know, we ask them to speak up. We ask them to speak their mind. We ask them to just say no, to speak out against sexual harassment, to speak out against inequality. But if we don't teach our young girls to speak at an early age, that doesn't just happen. You know, that's not, it takes practice to have a voice. You have to use it again and again and again before you can say no or stop, don't touch me, you know? If you're taught that adults are right all the time, it's hard to go against the power that is around you. And I don't think that I had those roadblocks when I was young. So I thought I was funny. I thought I was smart when I was little. I thought that I made sense. You know, so from moving from that place of understanding the power and the rightness and the truth of my voice, then how you use it is more linked to your values than anything else, right?
That's right.
And then it goes back to how you were raised. Because when you have a voice, you know, you just can't use it any kind of way, you know? You can't just say what's that. This whole tell it like it is business, that's nonsense. You know, you don't just say what's on your mind. You don't tweet every thought. Most of your first initial thoughts are not worthy of the light of day. And I'm not talking about anybody in particular. I'm talking about us all.
We are so not talking about anybody in particular.
Because everybody does that. I mean, that's the thing about young people. It's like tweeting and social media. That is a powerful weapon that we just hand over to little kids. You know, a 10-year-old, here you go. Tell it like it is. And it's like, no, you don't. You need to think and spell it right and have good grammar, too.
And I think also that understanding of not only of having a voice, but also understanding that you have advocates in your parents. And that is part of that. I mean, I think about that was definitely, I'm thinking, was I taught that way explicitly? And I think I was actually. And was also taught, my dad always, I had a crisp bill on me at all times because he said, if you have to leave the job, the man, the situation, danger.
You got your 20.
You got your 20. It was a 20 and it was crisp.
Out of there.
But you get out. And then people will help you sort the other things out later. And that is a profound thing to carry in this life with all of its unexpected things.
Well, when you have the power of support, then I think how you debate, and you're a lot more respectful. You're a lot more cautious. You know, you're not so ready. You're humble. You're a little skeptical, and that skepticism is not just about the other person, but you have to have a healthy skepticism in your own view that you are not always right. You know, that you have to, as Barack had said, we all have to be open to the differences and the possibilities of other people's truths. So you're careful with your words. You're careful with how you debate. And I think, you know, when you're the first lady or the president, the commander-in-chief, and you have that voice and that power and that platform, I think what comes with that is the responsibility to know that every word you utter has consequences.
Yes.
You know, it can, and I said this in the course of many of my speeches, that words matter at this level. And you learn how much they matter at this level, but that doesn't mean that anybody in this room is free to be careless with words and how they debate, because at this level you see how much words matter. But the truth of how much words matter is true for each and every one of us. Mm-hmm. So you can't just slash and burn up folks just because you think you're right. You know, you have to treat people as if they are precious, all of them, even the people you don't agree with. Mm-hmm. If we thought that way, you know, if we lived life that way, we wouldn't have to be taught how to debate. We would just be treating each other as decent human beings, and we would treat one another with respect. Mm-hmm. But again, I think that starts with the values that you learn growing up. Mm-hmm. Because if nobody's valued your voice, it's hard for you to know control and compromise, and it starts very young, I think. Mm-hmm. And the consistency of seeing those values throughout your life affects how you debate, how you disagree, how you talk, how you advocate, how you speak up for yourself. And it's all practice.
And when that leads us into civic work, community work, and this is a little bit of a move into thinking about how you take care of yourself so that you can be a helpful person in your community, so that all of this wisdom can be shared. I wanted to just read a few lines from a poem that I really love that feels like it's speaking to what you were describing earlier with your parents. And maybe it's not here, but it's by Marge Piercy, a great Detroit poet. Just a few lines. And this is her poem. Many of you probably know this. It's called To Be of Use. And the excerpt goes, "The people I love the best jump into work head first without dallying in the shadows. I love people who strain in the muck and the mud to move things forward, who do what has to be done again and again. The pitcher cries out for water to carry, and a person for work that is real." So that's from Marge Piercy's Beautiful. To Be of Use. Mm-hmm. I love it. Mm-hmm. I think that's all of you here. You are the people who just get up and do what has to be done. That is you. That is the president. But, you know, you can give and give and give to be helpful, but how do you think about staying strong and the role of self-care, not as a luxury, but as a part of being a helpful person in community?
Oh, yeah. It's stuff we talk, my girlfriend's circle, we talk about that all the time, self-care. And I think self-care is something that you have to practice as well. But you have to value yourself to want to care about yourself. And it starts there. You have to think that you're worthy, you know, because sometimes a lot of us do-gooders, a lot of us doers, we're doing for others because somehow we can't do it for ourselves. So the work that we do sometimes is a distraction from focusing on what we as the individual needs. It's easy to focus on fixing somebody else, you know, because it allows you to ignore the stuff that you need to work on internally. So sometimes it's a distraction. It's a good socially acceptable distraction, but it's a distraction nonetheless. But I think it starts with thinking about that point. It's like, what are we all doing for ourselves in the midst of this? How do we expect to keep going and doing for others if we ourselves are not emotionally, physically healthy? You know, if we don't take that time in that moment, and for so many, it is really just a moment. You know, it's a moment to take some time out to exercise. You know, nobody's telling anybody to run a marathon. You know, it's just a matter of like, figure out how to walk every day, how to stand up, how to move your body, you know, how to, get blood pumping through you. It doesn't have to be miraculous. But we have to think about, well, when it's time to do that, why? What stops us? And that, everybody in this room has to answer that for themselves, because those are the demons that haunt us, the things that keep us from taking care of ourselves. But you also learn when you're a mother. This is something that I learned. And I learned a lot of this when I became a mother, because when you have children, you have to be fiercely organized to get anything done. And I learned that if I don't put myself up on the priority list, that somehow my kids will eventually get knocked down on that list. If I'm not protecting my time, if I'm not learning how to say no, even to the best things, even to the most worthy things, because I need to sleep or I need to eat or I need to take time out to exercise, that I am no good to my children. And once again, as one of those do-gooders, it's easier for me to make changes because of this baby than it is to do it for myself. But we need to be having that conversation because our health is the thing that will keep us going, which is why I focus so much on health and nutrition in the White House. It's something that we cannot afford to ignore, that self-care, that meditation, that time out, that yoga, that whatever that is for you, it has to happen. So one of the tricks that I learned, and I learned this as a working mother, because I looked up and I realized a year can go by, and I talked to my sister-in-law about this too, that you say yes to everybody else first. You say yes to the conference, yes to the rally, yes to the speech, yes to the, to the political event. And before you know it, your calendar's booked, right? Your whole year, you have given it away, if you think about it, by so readily saying yes to everyone first. You look up and you don't have time. Because let me tell you, when people are trying to get stuff done, they're organized. They got people, they're calling you a year in advance. I started to get insulted when people would call me a year in advance. Because I'm sort of like, so you want me to give you in a year, you want me to tell you now in a year that you can have this whole day before me and my kids have ever even thought about what that day means for us. Well, do we want that day? Do my kids need that day for a class or a potluck? Or because what would happen is that you'd say yes, and then little Malia would come up, and it's like, we got a class play. Well, Mommy gave that time away a year ago. And little Malia's like, well, I wish I had a scheduler. I would have gotten on your calendar sooner, but I'm 4. And you start thinking to yourself, well, yeah, that's kind of crazy. And it plays out in terms of whether you're going to go to the gym or not. I mean, as my mom says, we all get up and we go to work, sick, tired, you name it. But the minute you talk about, can I walk on the treadmill for 30 minutes? I don't have time. So I started working my schedule so that we'd start the year. Before I would do anything, I would put me and my kids on my calendar first. So that takes work, and it would, and I had helps and assistants and people who could look at calendars. And when you're first lady, you got a lot of help. So the school will actually change report card dates for you. It's like, we really want to come. Can you figure this out? Can you really tell us when the class play will be? Can you organize this in a year? But we would force the school to answer some questions. And it would take a couple of weeks to get them to make sure every parent-teacher conference was on there, every school game, every tournament, and I put that on the calendar first. Then I would put me on there. When do I want to hang out with my girlfriends? When am I going to exercise? When am I going to take a vacation? When am I going to breathe? How do I want my life to flow first? I put that on the calendar.
Yep.
And then what was left for everybody else. Work. Barack was on there too. Let me not forget, because he might, just in case he slips in. Honey, you were there too. Put him on he was up there. He was up high.
But see, so what you're hearing is gospel here, because I think that it's actually very profound, and you always had a great deal of clarity. We became mothers within 2 months of each other with the children.
They were on the floor playing with each other.
On the floor, oh, so
and
cute.
We'd be talking and drinking wine. It's like, they're fine.
Yeah. Just a little wine. It was before they could walk and get into things.
Just a little bit.
But you always had clarity also that you had to be systematic, that you had to, put the oxygen mask on first, and also that this myth of the superwoman.
Oh,
This idea that
that's
you
a
would
lie.
only be made crazy trying to do everything simultaneously.
Yeah.
And that very, kind of almost methodical breakdown and ordering is a hugely important principle that just, I think, needs to be drilled into us
And
over
that's,
and over.
we are not ruthless about ourselves.
Yeah.
We do, when you talk about all of that we do, everybody in this room is used to doing that for their project, for their organization, for their kids, for their program participants, for their community. We all operate like that. Everybody in this room operates like that. We just cut that off when it comes to our lives. Yeah. We don't apply those same principles. And that's what I said to myself. I'm going to apply that because, look, I can get a lot done. I'm very ruthlessly efficient. Mm-hmm. But I have to be organized about me. I have to be as organized about my life as I am about my work. I have to plan my happiness. That's the thing. We think happiness just happens, and it can, but you got to work at some happiness too. You got to think about, in this year, when am I going to laugh? When am I going to have fun? When am I going to stop and smell the roses? And then you got to plan it. Yeah. Because if you don't, the work, the need, the agenda will always overcome everything. And look, the thing is, the work, the need, the agenda will always be there. Because even in the process of me putting myself higher up on my list, the work was still there. Yes. We got a lot done in the 8 years that I was First Lady. Quite frankly, I'm pretty proud of that. Yes. But I was able to do that and create sanity for my team, too. Because a lot of us are working and leading teams of people, and they will take their sanity cues from us at the top. So if we're just crazy pushing all the time, what I would tell my team, for every event I do, that means you're doing like 3 times the work just to get it done. So, and Tina's over there laughing, but I would tell Tina, don't put it on the calendar, because that means like 3 times the work for everybody else. So everybody's got to be ready to understand that. Mm-hmm. So I always put work and time into context. Yes. And that's something that we don't do. We just let it happen. We let it take over us. Mm-hmm. And I think we can do good for others and we can do a better job of doing good for others if we take care of ourselves. But we have to start having those conversations.
And explicitly, I mean, to the question of women and women friends and sister friends, and this business of scheduling your laughter, which I have observed that in the presidential years, it feels that your friendships with women have deepened. Oh your circle of us has deepened. You fed that, and we fed each other in that. But can you talk about your women friends and laughing and why that's necessary?
Let me tell you, I love my husband, and he is my rock. But my girlfriends are my sanity. And when you live 8 years in the White House, where you can't even open a window, you can't walk out on your balcony without notifying 3 people so that they can shut down security. Your walk outside is a walk around that same circle in the South Lawn over and over and over again, because the thought of you leaving those gates requires 50 people's attention and work and inconvenience. When you live like that for 8 years, you need your girlfriends, and in order to, and nothing is spontaneous. And so I learned, because all our spontaneity was basically taken away from us. So you have to plan when you can't be spontaneous. There was never any such thing as me. I even do this now. It's like, can I leave? I'm asking somebody, can I walk out the door yet? I don't move until some 30-year-old tells me, ma'am, you can leave now. It's like, okay, all right. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. So I had to plan my time with my girlfriends that kept me grounded, and brought me laughter. I mean, I have a crew of just wonderful. I am blessed to have a wonderful community of girlfriends and people I've raised my kids with. And, I have a whole set of mothers at our girls' school who keeps me out of the gossip, but notified about what's going on. It's like, ooh, girl, you don't want to go to that potluck. It's like, okay. Thank you. So all of that has kept me whole in a way that, and that's something for all folks. I think women, we do it better than men, but, I know, sad for you guys. Y'all should get you some friends.
Friends.
Get you some friends and talk to each other. Because that's the other thing we do. We straighten each other out on some things. Our girlfriends, we're just like, and I just wish, sometimes, Baraki, who are you talking to? And it can't just be Marty.
This is a home conversation.
This is a home conversation, but every one of you, as I see a lot of men laughing, y'all need to go talk to each other about your stuff because there's so much of it. It's so messy. Just talk about why y'all the way you are. Because you're running the world, and I know that's one of the questions. It's like raising our men. We got to. I was talking to my mother about that the other day.
Yes.
It's like the problem in the world today is we love our boys, and we raise our girls. We raise them to be strong, and sometimes we take care not to hurt men, and I think we pay for that a little bit, and that's a we thing because we're raising them, And it's powerful to have strong men, but what does that strength mean? Does it mean respect? Does it mean responsibility? Does it mean compassion? Or are we protecting our men too much so they feel a little entitled and a little, a little self-righteous sometimes? But that's kind of on us too, as women and mothers.
Yeah.
As we nurture men and push girls to be perfect.
I wanted to get more deeply into that. No, because I was thinking about the conversation that you had recently with Shonda Rhimes, and you were talking about child rearing, and you said we have to cherish our girls. You put the word cherish. And I was like, yes, yes, yes. And I also, as a mother of boys and as a, sort of auntie to many, thought, but what about our boys? So, can you say more? Because I also think not just our black boys, but, I think that cherishing black boys is necessary in a world where they are not always safe, loved, or valued. I mean, I know we see that the same way, but I'm really interested in thinking further about what we teach our girls and our boys, what cherishing and love means for boys who are also carrying sometimes a responsibility that is too much when it comes with all that, be strong, lead the world stuff.
Yeah. So, look, and I don't have boys. I'm not raising boys. I'm raising girls. So a lot of my focus as a mother, I'm thinking about how do I make sure these girls are sturdy and able to sort of exist in this world and it's a world that is dangerous for women, But I think it goes back to Marion Robinson. It's like we have to raise our children to be people. Whether they have had struggles or whatever the world has for them, we have to raise them to be ready to be independent, well-meaning, kind, compassionate people. And I don't know that that's different for boys or girls, regardless of what they're confronting in the world. Sometimes we treat our children too preciously because of the issues they've dealt with. I mean, it's like Barack and I thought about with Malia and Sasha, okay, we could have spent 8 years feeling sorry for them, that they were living in a bubble, that every misstep for them would be on YouTube, or that they had to drive around in their teenage years with men with guns, that, their privacy, that they didn't have access to their father in a way. We could have felt bad for them, and that there would have been a truth there. But our view was that this is life for them. This is their life. And we can't apologize for the life that they have because a whole lot of it is good. So it's like, get up, go to school. Don't feel sorry for yourself. It's hard, but it's hard for everybody. Go to school, get over it. For our men, it's true. Life's hard. It ain't fair, but you got to get up. Still got to be a man. You got to get out there. I can't protect you from everything. I can't cherish you to death So we have to raise our children to be the adults that we want them to be.
Yes.
And that starts young. So you can't be so afraid that life will break them that you don't prepare them for life. So I think that is as true for our boys as it is for our girls. But sometimes our fear keeps us from pushing our kids out into the cold, cruel world.
Yes.
And then they're not ready, and we wonder why. We
Yep.
wonder why they're broken, why they are, why they're nervous, why they're fearful, why they, But it starts young. Those messages.
We have amazingly come to
I
time.
know, that
And we
wasn't
didn't even, my cards, I didn't
We
even
didn't
need
get
my
through the
cards. We
cards.
just talked around all kinds of things, but I did want to end with a wonderful question. So one question from me, we're going to end here, and another wonderful, wonderful question from the audience.
Okay.
From a listener in Detroit.
Detroit?
Actually, I just wanted to say a listener in Detroit like I was a DJ, but
Okay,
it
that
might
was
not
good.
have been a listener in Detroit. But so my question is an example of something that has given you hope in the last week.
Oh.
And the audience question, which is a beautiful one, is what has recently brought you to tears?
Oh.
And you could answer that in a couple of different ways, however you wish.
Hope is right in this room. This summit, all of you here, the conversations, your voices, your missions, your goals, the possibilities that you all have to be leaders in the world, that gives me hope. I can sleep better after this because this isn't just happening here, it's happening around the world. So thank you for giving me personally a little hope. It's been fun to watch, and it will be fun to watch what you continue to do. What has brought me to tears? In fun ways, in all ways, probably the answer is children. Children, my children have brought me, my two girls have brought me so much happiness and pride that how they have carried themselves and responded to pressures that they didn't ask for, living a life that they didn't want, and coming out on the other end as good, solid people.
Yes. That
Happiness and pride can bring me to tears just talking about them.
Yes.
Tears of sadness, children, when I see any child mistreated or unloved or uneducated or unwanted, when we don't value our children, the most precious people on this planet, and we do it so often when we don't want our taxes raised, or we don't want kids to be educated equally, or we don't really focus on healthcare, and we're not thinking about our environment. I've worked in hospitals. I have seen children dying of cancer at very young ages, little babies in the NICU. And anytime I think about the brokenness that is in us, that doesn't force us to get our acts together for our children. When we talk about immigration and our DACA kids, and we talk about, what we want for this world, when I think about what we are not willing to do for our kids, that brings me to tears.
Yes.
But then I can, have tears of just so much complete joy when I think of all of the interactions that I've had with children over the course of my life and in the last 8 years. Little Girl Scouts sleeping, having a sleepover on the White House lawn, little trick-or-treaters, little kids that, are just so full of wonder and joy. The little ones who don't know to be hateful yet, who are still, they still rely on us. They still look to us to protect them and to love them. And they are so open, So that brings me to tears, that sheer happiness and the innocence of children.
Yes.
And I always think that if we are guided by that very raw instinct in us as the producers of human life, that if we, just act every day, not for ourselves, not for some greater good, but just for the little kids in our lives, you know? And we treat those kids, and we think that the kids that we know, the ones that we've born life to, that we auntie and uncle and we mentor, if we value them and we value all kids as much as we value them, we will be fine. Yep. If we operate with that level of goodness in our hearts.
Yes.
But that requires us as the grown-ups to sacrifice a lot more than we're willing to do. It requires us to be put on the back burner in the way that my mother and father put themselves on the back burner to make us the most special people in the world. Mm-hmm. So we have to get out of the way. Our egos, our hatred, our jealousy, we have to push that all down as the adults in the room, because we are now all adults, and we have to get out of the way for the possibility of children. And I hope that every one of you in this room leads with that sentiment, with that compassion, with that vision, that this isn't about us. Yeah. It's about our kids. And if we can do that, we'll get this right.
Yes.
But that puts us way far down on the totem pole, Yeah. Our egos have to be checked in a very powerful way.
Yes.
And we have work to do on that front.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Elizabeth.
And I have
my
one
girlfriend.
more thing to say.
Oh, wait.
And one more thing. I'm concluding this, which is to say, just that I didn't mean for you to go down. But what I just wanted to say in saying thank you to you is that your intimate self, the self you are up close, the self that I feel so lucky to know and love, is the same self that you share. That self is consistent, and I think that in that is a powerful, powerful, powerful lesson and example of knowing yourself and sharing that love in a consistent way. And for that, we all thank you. So thank you.
Thanks, babe. You guys, thanks so much.